going to learn how to improve your reading comprehension by being a reading detective. Before we start, let's talk about what is the job of a detective. So I want you to turn and talk to your partners about what is it that a detective does and what does he do well to make his job successful. Details, right? Is a fingerprint, is a footprint or a tire mark, are those details of the crime scene? And then when you put those details together, you might be able to solve the mystery, right? So that's what we also have to do being a reading detective. We need to use the clues that we see. So the first step in any investigation as a detective, or your job as a reading detective, is to use your senses. And we start with visualizing. That's always the first step. We visualize, we look, we make pictures in our head, we use our senses to figure out what is happening. And I'm going to show you today how to use your senses to make sense of text, to how to increase your comprehension by being a detective and using clues and putting that together to broaden your understanding of what is happening in text. Okay? So today we're going to be a reading detective. After I write my name, is I put my pencil down and I go through the packet that I have in front of me. But wait, why am I going through the packet? What do you think I'm doing as a detective or reading detective? What would be the purpose of me going through the packet before I start? Turn and talk to your partners. What would be the benefit of this? Are you also trying to find connections between the passages?
These are paragraphs.
They would also tell you how many questions there
There's different answers in each paragraph.
Okay? And can you track the speaker? So I heard lots of good things as I walked around. You said that the benefit of going through the passage is to find out what the different stories are in the packet, right? Just like when you take AZ Merit or a benchmark assessment or an IU assessment, the first thing you want to do is see how many stories are in the assignment. The next thing you're going to do is see, are there any connections between the stories? Because very often on reading assessments, we pair text because there's a common topic. And we want you to compare and contrast two passages. So that's another thing you're going to be looking for as a reading detective. The next thing you're going to look at is how long are each passage? How many questions go with each passage? I'm going to give you 1 minute without talking to your partner. I want you to start previewing the text. Go ahead, 1 minute. Start looking for those things. Don't read, you're just previewing. One of the texts was about can plants talk. Then you're going to learn about animals. Who can add to what she said?
It says over here, like sound, sight, touch, and smell.
Sound, sight, touch, and smell. Let me be a detective and put that together. We call those our what? Say that louder. Senses. Okay. So the first article was about plants that talk. The second article was about animals using their different senses to do what? Go back to the text. See what clues you can find. We haven't even started to read yet. We're just doing a visual preview. What are the animals doing with their senses? Yes, say it all together. They're communicating. High five me. They're communicating. What's a simpler word for communicating? It's in the title. And the answer is? Talking. Okay. How many questions went with the first story? Be careful. Some of them say you have to refer to 2 stories. Who can tell me how many questions go with just the first story? You should. 5. So, put your finger on the title. I want to see. Okay, can you tell me how you knew that was the title?
On the first page,
He did 2 detective strategies. First, he looked at the title. So everybody do what he did. Look at the title. Can plants talk? he identified that as the title. The next thing he did was he turned to page 118, and then he looked at the questions prepared from the preview, just visually previewing the test. We know that we have 2 passages to read, right? They're different. One has plants, one has animals. But there's something that brings them together and makes them the same. What is it that ties these 2 passages together? Communication. Can you say that louder, please? Communication. Now, how is it different? How are the passages different? So we're ready for it. How are the passages different? Yes.
One is plants communicate.
Yes. One is how plants communicate, and the other passage is about how animals communicate. And we said the simpler word for communicate is? Communication is the higher level word.
Talking.
Talking. I see you have genre posters in the back of the room. That's excellent. Your teacher should always be teaching different types of genres. Who can tell me what type of genre this is? And why and how do you know what kind of text this is? Yes, nonfiction, right? How do you know this is nonfiction? What text features did you use as a reading detective to figure out this was nonfiction? See a table of contents? Did you look at the heading, the title, the photographs, the maps, the charts, a timeline, a diagram? Which text feature did you use to identify this as being nonfiction right away? And in nonfiction, what kind of text feature do we normally have?
Photos.
Photographs. So photographs of real things, right? So we know that the first story is nonfiction. What is the author's purpose of of writing nonfiction text? Why do authors write nonfiction text? Why does an author write nonfiction?
To inform you.
Can you say that louder so everyone can hear you?
To inform you.
To inform us. Go ahead and start reading. Put your pencil down. You're reading the text one time through. As you're reading the text, we're reading the text that's animal talk. The pictures on page 115. Look at the pictures on page 115. We have 8 photographs. So let's use some of the detective work to figure out what the information is about the photographs. I should be looking at the headings, I should be looking at the captions, and I should be looking at the details of the pictures, right? Because sometimes text features like charts and photographs, can they give us a lot of information? Yeah, so we really need to know how to look at this. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to answer it. How does a chimpanzee communicate?
By touching hands.
And how does, go ahead and underline the detail, touching hands. So that's the detail, or the E, if we were doing step up to writing and we were doing 2-column notes, that's your example of how they communicate, right? Look at the heading, smell with the deer. See what word you would underline. What clue indicates that deers use smell to communicate? Ah, good job. What's the word you underlined?
Sense.
So he underlined the word scent. Animals use, deer leave a scent behind, and that word goes with smell, right? So if you know different word parts, like smell, when you do like a concept web, you could put the word smell, scent goes with the word smell. They are joined together because they have the same concept, right? So I want you to do one more on your own. How about the puppies? What word indicates touch? What key word would you underline? Lick. Yes. Dogs they could touch the other dog with their paw, but in this example, the way that they touched the other dog was by licking, and that's the way they communicate. So that would be how I would read something with that much detail, being a detective, to find the clues that connect words like smell was scent. Right? We're going to now read the first two paragraphs, and I'm going to model for you how you can use a lot of those same strategies to read and annotate. So go ahead and quietly read the first paragraph on page 116. Okay, so eyes back here, and I'm going to start. So you read the first two paragraphs by yourself, and now I'm going to read with you, and then we're going to collaborate. We're going to discuss what is the most important information in the first two paragraphs. And then I'm going to show you how to write down your clues, because a detective will write down clues, and what you're going to be writing down is one or two words that tell you to help you remember what is in the first two paragraphs, so that when you go to answer the questions, you will use your clues, your annotations, to help you find the evidence. Okay? So look at paragraph 1. I'm going to start. My voice loud, your voice soft. Track with me. Put your finger on number 1. Animals don't speak words like people, but they do talk. The introduction, it starts to explain how animals talk. And it told us 4 things that they use. These are your star ideas, your key details on how they communicate. I want you to take your pencil, and I want you to circle 4 star ideas in paragraph 1. Yes, now, ready to go?
Sound, sight, touch, and smell.
Okay, now we're going to be a reading detective. What is one word or 2 words that I can use to connect those 4 words? Sound, sight, touch, and smell. How are they connected? What clue would I write down in my little detective journal? They're all senses. That's exactly what I would do. So next to paragraph 1, I'm going to start writing some of my clues. I'm going to write down 5 senses. But this one only talked about 4 senses, right? The next thing I'm going to do next to paragraph 1 is I'm going to write the word intro. It's an abbreviation for what longer word? Introduction. It introduces the idea that animals communicate using 5 senses to the reader. It's setting me up to know what's coming, right? Is an introduction important?
Yes.
Yes. It's getting me ready. How does that heading tell me what information is going to come up next? Who can tell me when I use a heading? How does a heading help me? How does a heading help me?
To tell you what the text is going to tell you.
It's going to tell me what that part of the text is going to be all about, right? So that heading tells me that the next 2 paragraphs are going to be all about
Dogs.
and how they
Communicate.
using
Senses.
If the question had something to do with how whales communicate, which paragraphs could I find the evidence in? Being detectives.
4 or 5.
4 or 5. Do you see how a heading can help you? Would I waste my time going to look at paragraph 2 and 3 for whales, information on whales? No. So if you know how to use your text features effectively, that's another strategy for being a reading detective. Okay? So we're going to read paragraph 1 together, and then we're going to write down our annotation, just like I did for intro. We're going to come up with what is paragraph 2 may also be about. Play with me, or I'm happy to see you. Okay, so when I read that information, I got the general idea of what it was about, but now I need to use a strategy called visualizing, and I'm also going to act it out. If I act out something like a movie in my head, I'm replaying the scene, just like a detective would. When they come upon some clues, they have to start to picture what could have happened before they got there, right? So you're going to do the same thing. As I read, I want you to make pictures in your head, okay? And then I'm going to model for you. If I was a 3rd grade student, I'm going to act it out so you can see what visualizing looks like, okay? So watch me. A dog might bark when it wants to go outside or show that it's hungry. Oh yeah, I have a dog. I can make a connection to that. My dog, when it wants to go outside to pee, it starts to bark, right? And sometimes my dog barks when
Did I
he's
just
hungry.
read that
Gave you a clue to what the word whimpering might mean. Go ahead and circle the clue that you think goes with whimpering. And the answer is? Crying. Yes. So the author tells you that whimpering and crying are the same thing. So here where you saw whimpering in the text, you circled it because you didn't know what it meant maybe. And then as you kept reading, very close to this will be the definition. I'm going to draw an arrow to connect it. I'm telling my brain I'm doing some detective work. I see that whimpering and crying, and then the last sentence, they go. It may also mean play with me, and I'm glad to see you. Okay. Barking, whimpering, crying, growling. Can you underline those words? Bark, growl, whimper, cry. Which sense was the dog using to communicate? The examples are bark, growl, whimper, cry. What's my main detail? What sense is it using? And the answer is? Sound, right? So I'm going to write down sounds or sound to communicate. And I underline the examples. I underline bark, I underline whimper, cry, and growl. And that's all I'm going to do to annotate. But do you see, if you go that deep into text, and you use visualizing skills, and you use reread to find out the meaning of unknown words, those are just strategies you should be using all the time. Okay? And it helps you with your comprehension. Okay?